Right, it looks like we're still waiting for a couple more committee members to join us before we'll have quorum. But I guess in the meantime, since it is 11:30, I'll go through our preamble so that we can get rolling as soon as we have quorum. So this is the December 5th, 2024 meeting of the Historic Ohio City Design Review Advisory Committee. To go over the virtual meeting regulations and procedures. The meeting shall be conducted according to Robert's Rules of Order. Actions during the meeting will be taken by roll call vote. Recusal due to a conflict of interest should be stated for the record prior to the start of any presentation. The recused committee member will then leave the meeting for the duration of the case discussion. The chair will call the meeting to order and ask for a roll call of the committee. The administrator will introduce the first project. The meeting will then be turned over to the applicant to proceed through the presentation. Each presentation should be completed prior to questions and comments from the committee. Once the presentation has concluded, the administrator will provide background information if applicable and will read any received comments. The committee will then begin deliberations and project review. Please use the raise hand feature if you'd like to speak. And after deliberations and review concludes, the committee will render its recommendation and/or motion. The applicant may leave the meeting after project review is complete. All projects will follow the same format until all projects are heard by the committee. Once all projects are heard, the chair will call for any committee/administrative reports. After all reports have been heard, the chair will adjourn the meeting. Regarding community comments, any and all community members may provide their written comments, thoughts, or questions regarding projects presented to the committee. Community members may also telephone their comments or questions to the committee administrator. All comments, thoughts, or questions must be submitted to the committee administrator no later than 48 hours prior to the start of the meeting. Submissions can be made again through email, calling our general phone line here in Landmarks, or by mailing or dropping off comments in our office at 519 City Hall. Public comment received after the deadline will not be heard by the committee. Public comment will be collected by Landmark staff and sent to the committee members for review prior to the scheduled meeting, and then Landmark staff will summarize the received comments during the meeting. Applicant of the project is under no obligation to answer any community questions. Community members are invited to attend the Design Review Advisory Committee meetings, but there will be no open public comment period. Reminder, all projects are being reviewed using the Secretary of the Interior Standards for Rehabilitation and are being considered for the issuance of the Certificate of Appropriateness. All projects are considered on a case-by-case basis, and the Historic Ohio City Design Review Advisory Committee makes recommendations to the Cleveland Landmarks Commission. These recommendations are not final actions. Depending on the scope of the project, submissions may be approved administratively or will need to be reviewed by the Cleveland Landmarks Commission. Projects will be scheduled at the next available commission meeting after an action is taken. It looks like we do have quorum now. I do not see our first applicant here, who is, I guess, also our chairwoman. So Phil, do you mind hopping in as chair?
Yeah.
At least get the meeting running.
Yeah. So calling the December 5th Historic Ohio City Design Review Advisory Committee to order. And could you call roll?
Ms. Anderson?
Here.
Ms. Flaherty?
Here.
Mr. Frondorf?
Here.
Ms. Land?
Here.
Mr. Miller?
Here.
Mr. Persons?
Here.
Mr. Talley?
Here.
Mr. Trevisano?
Here.
Ms. Marinucci? All right, Mr. Chairman, we do have quorum. As I said, I don't see Nia here. It's actually our first applicant. So is there anyone else? I see Mr. Shu here. Were you planning on presenting today, or I guess?
No, Nia is planning to present. Let me shoot her a message really quick.
Okay. I'd say we could just jump to our second agenda item, but that is schematic review, and I think probably should have a lot of good discussion there. So we can figure out if Nia can hop on. That would be great.
Okay, just send her a
we can-
message.
Just push it to the back of it. Yeah, then you guys would probably have to sit through a longer discussion than
Yeah,
you're
thank you.
banking on
I
for your.
appreciate that.
And I apologize, my camera is not working, so I'm having technical difficulties here this morning.
And while we're waiting on Nia, I will be recusing for the second presentation on the West 26th Street project.
Thank you, I guess, for bringing that up. I was gonna, I guess, just mention that before, after the first project, but yeah, since I assume, I guess Phil will probably be chairing this whole meeting. As the property that the West 26 project is located on was purchased from or recently transferred from OCI, so I assume board members of OCI who are on the committee will be recusing themselves. They were
That's
kind of
correct. The
involved in that
OCI,
transaction.
a subsidiary of OCI owns the property and is under contract with the applicant, and that's the basis for the recusal.
Yeah, thank you.
I will also have to recuse for that.
Okay.
I will also have to recuse for that, Dan.
Oh man. Luckily we have.
Will we have enough voting members with us?
Well, luckily, so it's just schematic reviews, so it's just feedback and comments. So we don't need to take action, but just for next time when this comes for final approval, since it seems like about half the committee is will have to recuse for this one, as long as we have quorum at the beginning of the meeting. We don't need quorum at the beginning of each case. So, yeah, so that we should still be good.
Nia is logging in.
Okay, I appreciate everyone's patience. I guess in the meantime, the first case is HOC 24-26, 4208 Clinton Avenue. We looked at this schematically September 5th, 2024 meeting. It's for the new construction of the Shoe residence. When Nia gets logged on, she'll walk us through her presentation. But yeah, they've made some adjustments since you guys saw this schematically. So we will see how everyone responds. Web is always a super fast sign-in from my experience. Never sends you to more than one screen or anything. Looks like Nia's here now. So Nia, we
There she is.
Hi,
It's,
I'm so sorry. I was in
yeah, it
another
should be on the
meeting
screen.
and I did not catch the time. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. Phil is acting as chair, as we're assuming you're recusing yourself from this one.
I am. Thank you.
We also had, just to get you up to date, we had a discussion about the second project that sounds like OCI is involved with. So kind of the assumption that committee members of OCI would be recusing from that one as well. So
Yes.
Phil's, chair for both of those, and but I will note you as attending, and yeah, your presentation's up on the screen. So let me know when you'd like me to flip through your slides.
Thank you. I'm so sorry again. Okay, so we're back with the final design review presentation for the Shoe residence, which is at 4208 Clinton Avenue. Next slide. I'm going to I think everyone or most everyone has seen the existing conditions, but these are the historic mapping for reference. I did update some of the existing photos. This is the site as it is today. And I included this kind of like stitched together to illustrate that the like adjacent eastern neighbor is recessed. So we kind of get a heavy exposure on this corner. Next slide. Again, some updated existing condition photos of the site itself, just as the, you know, kind of vistas have changed as the weather has changed. And then same neighborhood kind of context photos, mostly along Clinton, focusing on new construction. There's a few renovations, as well as a couple other renovations in the historic district. Next slide. Again, our massing inspiration is still kind of like a modern Greek revival with a little colonial influence. And then our color palette inspiration is still kind of an earth, a deeper earth tone. Next slide. Okay, so I'm not sure from this committee, but definitely from landmarks, there were some questions about how the house physically is sited. So we have included an updated site plan in accordance with the survey to show the intention of the siting as well as the relationship to the two neighboring properties. We get quite a bit of breathing room on both sides from like on the western side from the existing driveway, and on the eastern side, again, that house that's pretty recessed back is, I think, far off enough of the parcel line naturally that we get a pretty good breathing room on either side from our neighbors. And the house itself pretty much spans like setback to setback on both sides with, I think, maybe a couple inches to spare. I also wanted to note there's a lot of conversation both here and at landmarks about the front porch, which we did expand, and you'll see that when we get to the elevations. But we also wanted to note that the house itself and the porch itself are very close to that sidewalk. So we do feel like it's going to be very welcoming and engaging, just, I mean, at the very least, based on its physical proximity to that front sidewalk. Next slide. These are just the schematic floor plans for quick reference. I'm not sure if they'll be relevant, but they're just here if we need them. Next slide. Okay, looking back at the front facade, it is similar to what we saw before, but we tweaked a lot of subtleties here based on feedback. That main item of which was really unifying the window styles and sizes a bit more to kind of calm kind of the different openings, which we have done here. We also, again, expanded that front porch, both mostly in width, kind of reorganized the way that front door window system works, like the side lights and the transom, in order to expand that porch. And I think it's quite similar to the previous plan overall. Same massing, a little bit of finesse on the massing and the dimensioning, just based on like constructability, but it's substantially similar. Next slide. Again, that side view, kind of unifying a little bit more of the window typology and sizing across. One thing of note in that is that the carriage house itself, we opted for removing the divisions. This was just a cost-saving measure that we don't think detracts from the design. The main house itself, so to speak, kind of has that the two typologies of the 6/6 and then the 2x3. Next slide. This is the what I call like the interior north face. This is the back of the house, and it's kind of like what my clients will see on the inside of their backyard. And then if you go to the next one, this is the true rear elevation from the alley we court. Next slide. Same, that kind of interior western elevation where you can see, like, you know, what they will see from their yard. And then next slide. This is the western elevation, as you would see, like kind of approaching down Clinton. One other change here is that we did add some windows on that western facade to help kind of activate it a little bit more and to get them some more interior light. Next slide. So we did a little rendering showing the proposed palette and kind of a brief kind of context and scale of the two immediate neighbors, as well as kind of their existing street trees that we think will help soften and integrate the design into the streetscape. Next slide. So from a specific materiality standpoint, we're proposing James Hardy board smooth finish in the timber bark color. It's one of their existing offerings, like pre-finished offerings that we all felt was really compatible with what we wanted to do aesthetically. Certainteed dimensional shingles driftwood color, which is just a nice tonal, like muddy brown. And then the plan for the front entry steps, the topping, there's just a little tiny sliver of sidewalk that we have to create, is going to be salvaged sandstone pavers, which we have already sourced locally off of Facebook Marketplace. And then another change that was driven by cost is that we would like to propose the fiberglass clad wood windows, which is from the Marvin Elevate line, still a true STL, not between glass, but it was a significant cost savings to go from aluminum clad to a fiberglass clad. So we are going in that direction. And then I'm showing the gas lantern. They're going to have 2 true gas lanterns on the front facade. And then we are showing a Belgian brick rosewood blend for the brick elements on the home. And that's just a face brick. Next slide. On the rear, I did not render this side, so hopefully that's okay. So imagine the same materiality and colorway around the back, but we are just doing a it's called a vertical long panel style garage doors without glazing. Kind of just want those to recess and kind of blend in from the alley side. And then fiberglass entry doors on that garage piece with just a dark brown finish. And then wood privacy fence and a black lantern marching along the alley. Next slide. From looking again, kind of a little bit closer view of the immediate site plan from the street, we do have an existing sandstone border that runs the length of the property, which is always really, really great to have. And so that will be maintained. The Shoes would love to find a salvage cast iron fence and gate of the historic style to wrap that front portion of the property. I'm not sure that that's something that they'll pursue immediately. And if we change our minds or if we find something different, we would come back to the committee. But the plan would be to bring that cast iron fencing, like at least wrapping the front piece of the property to like the 12-foot back point, if I'm explaining that correctly. So per code, we would have that in the front and then switch to the wooden 6-foot fence for privacy around the sides and back of the property. And then again, those salvaged sandstone step and toppings, and you can kind of see how physically close the kind of porch structure is to the sidewalk. Next slide. Or is that my last one?
Looks like that's the last one.
Okay, that's the last one.
Thank you for presenting. I think everything looks good, but I will open it up to committee members for comment.
I just have 2 or 3 comments. So did I understand with the windows that the muttons are now going to be internal?
No, they're going to be external. They're just,
Okay.
Yeah, they're still, we actually went to Boston at the beginning of November, which was an incredible trip to really get into all the details of the windows. So they will be exterior. They will be SDLs. They will not be between glass.
Okay, and they're just fiberglass instead of aluminum clad. That's the change.
Correct.
Okay. All right. And Only two other comments. I think they're very similar to the comments I gave last time, which is the facade of the eastern part of it.
Mhm.
If there's a way to break up that large window massing, actually you could keep it on that last slide if you wanted, or go to slide 10, either one.
The front one, you mean? The
Yeah, the
south
front
facing?
one. Yeah, I think it was slide 10 when I reviewed it earlier. That one or the other one, it doesn't matter. To break up that large window massing there, either have some greater separation between the upper and lower windows, some way to make it the fenestration more in line with a Greek revival instead of this. I know it's a very modern element; it's a modern house.
Yeah.
But if there's a way to have more of a nod to a more traditional Greek revival, I think that would be that would add the appearance of the house. And then the windows to its right, the one on the top, if we could maybe make those of similar size or scale. And I feel bad for picking on all these windows, but then the window above it in the gable is the same size as the one on the western gable. And it
Yes.
looks because of that, it just looks ill proportioned relative to the other one. I didn't know if you were able to play around with that and maybe expand the size of that window a little bit.
Those are all noted, are all things we've discussed. The like block of windows, so to speak, at the staircase is definitely a modern element that's definitely a departure from the kind of more traditional elements of the house. It's a strong desire for the clients. So if this is their first preference, that's what we are asking for. But it's something that we are open to, modifying conditionally if that's something that everyone universally feels is necessary.
All right. I'll let everyone else weigh in on that one. And then my final comment, and this is a small one, but only I speak from practical experience. On the fence, I'm thrilled to hear that you're looking for a wrought iron fence. You have that sandstone there. And I know in the plan it said remove that and use that for the porch.
No, that's staying. Separate
That's staying.
sandstone. Yes.
Never
We're not
mind.
extracting it. Yes. And thank you for, I put cast iron, and then as I was saying that, I'm like, that's not right. It's
It's okay.
wrought iron. Thank you.
Okay. I thought that picture said that you were taking those and moving those to the porch.
No, it looks like it because they're of similar proportion.
Okay, never
but
mind.
The intention is to keep the border.
Okay. Then I have no other comments.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Do you have other comments? Oh, there we go.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. So can you go back to that rendered front elevation? So I don't have an issue with the full height window. It sounds like that's in front of the stair, but I'm wondering if you could talk about the double pair of windows to the side, the 2x3s. What was the reason that they don't match?
Those two on top of each other, you mean?
Yeah, so it looks like the second story is a little bit smaller than the first story.
Yes. That was originally I had it drawn where they did match, and then the second floor to me felt just a little bit too big. It can be. Like that's definitely not a sticking point. It just felt a little too I don't know how to describe it. That felt too big when I drew it that way. So
Okay.
if it's something that you think would benefit from going back to that, it certainly can.
I think that, to me, the order of the asymmetry and at least making those two kind of offset the larger opening on the left-hand side, looking at the page left-hand side, I think that would do a lot to offset the asymmetrical relationship of the two and kind of make it the composition read a little bit better. And then, similar to what Alex is saying, I don't know what that gable window is getting you. I wonder if potentially skylights could do the same thing in whatever that space is doing, so that I agree with Alex that window is kind of taking away from this elevation. If there's a way to get away from that and just let these three windows in this composition kind of celebrate this facade without anything else, I think that would be more successful. But those
Okay.
are the only things I have to say. Everything else looks great.
Thank you.
More comments from the committee?
I'll jump in real quick to add a different opinion on these windows. Sorry that we cannot accomplish any sort of unanimous perspective on this. So my understanding of this style of architecture is like as you increase the floor higher, those windows will get shorter just to emphasize the principality of like the main floor. So I think to me the distinguishing of the window heights makes sense, and that's like how my house is. And my house is really old. I just want to kind of applaud everyone working on this project, your clients and Nia, because I think there were a lot of alignment changes of things, and I think this project looks very good for a new construction. The porch, like very good. I'm like kind of personally mixed on Alex's previous comment of breaking up that large height of windows. Primarily because I think like you and your clients have already adjusted so much based of our perspectives of this project. I think if this is your one kind of different feature from the historical precedent, I mean, it doesn't look I don't have like an aversion to it. But if you want to break it up, I can see that also making sense. And then my perspective on that third floor attic gable window is, I think if you removed it, it would just create like a blank triangle of siding. So I think it should stay. For some reason, I almost think it should be a little bit bigger than the one left, just because the massing of that part of the house is bigger. So to maintain kind of a proportionality, maybe a little bit bigger, but I'm not sure. It honestly feels like I'm just offering you preferences of my own. So those are my comments. Great new build. That's all I got to say.
I'm gonna second Angelo on that. As far as the window and the gable, I guess an alternative is that it could be a like fake vent or something. Um, if it really looks that out, I definitely something feels like something needs to be there. Um, correct me if I'm wrong. It looks like you went from having that larger expanse of windows. It looks like it was broken up in the previous iteration. And it was a 3/3, and then you had the paneling in between, which I am kind of neither here nor there on that. I think it does look nice now as it's modern and everything. Um, I don't really have comment except to say I do see that you included paneling under the window on the sort of west front. I was kind of curious what drove that.
The western bump out is it's a bay, so it comes out. And then this one is flush to the facade.
Got it. Okay, so they're doing two different things. Yeah, I kind of have to second Angelo. I agree about the windows on the right, on the first floor, and the second floor being smaller because there's a hierarchy there. Overall, I think it looks really nice. I appreciate what you did with the porch. And I appreciate even showing the little chairs in the plan. Kind of make it look like it's being used. Yeah, maybe I guess that window could be a little bit larger. It is a large expanse, but I see it's also tied to all of the other windows of the same size. So I think it looks fine.
Thank you.
Other folks?
I don't really have any super strong opinions about any changes. I mean, my personal preference would be to also break up that window, but having gone through this process, I personally had sort of like a singular sticking point and made the other recommendations from this board. And I think compromises are fine. So if that's something that your clients are really attached to, I think, you've put so much thought into this project that I mean, I would be fine moving forward with it as is, really. So just putting that out there if we want to proceed or.
Thank you.
Any additional comments or a motion?
I-
Margaret?
Sure, go ahead.
add any. Sorry, Mark, I wasn't sure if you had anything to add. All right, then yeah, does somebody want to make a motion?
Before the motion, what was the feedback from Landmarks on the windows? Was it fine or different or the same as ours? Or I'm just trying to understand the big picture.
It was very similar. Dan, if you want to elaborate on it. But I want to, it was the same, pretty much the same commentary.
Yes, yeah, it was very similar. Just trying to find my notes on that, but yeah, it was, I guess, almost identical comments.
Yeah.
The comments from the others were that they wanted the clad to all align. It was slightly different on the windows, so they had asked us to make alignment and make it consistent across all the windows. So that's where you see the consistency in the cladding on all the windows on the front facing.
And they had also had preference for this color scheme over the
Yes.
more black color scheme, which we were not surprised by.
Yeah, that
that's
just
consistent
sort of,
from them.
yeah, the idea of sort of like simplifying the I guess variety of windows there were, and then there were some comments about, like, you guys had the front porch, making that, you know, bigger, more inviting, into the neighborhood a little better as like a real front porch. So
I'll give a stab at a motion. I'll move to approve as presented. I don't think we have uniform opinion on those windows, so I'll just say a recommendation, but not a condition, to continue studying those windows for further separation.
Do we have?
I'll second.
And Dan, could you take a call roll?
sure thing, Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Ms. Flaherty, are still here. Let's hear. Mr. Frondorf,
Yes.
Ms. Land,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Persons,
Yes.
Mr. Trevisano,
Yes.
and Mr. Talley.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, the motion passes unanimously.
All right.
Yeah, so I think, Nia, we have you guys I think scheduled for Landmarks next week. So I don't know if you were intending on making any changes or just going with this, but yeah, we can talk this afternoon if you did.
Yeah, I'll follow up with you.
Okay.
Thank you so much,
great.
everybody. And just a reminder, I'm recusing from next one, so I will be quiet.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess for those recusing, I think understand that as sort of somewhat involved with the project, you want to hear what's going on, but yeah, just muted and with cameras off, I think is appropriate. And so we do have recusing themselves from the second agenda item, Ms. Anderson, Mr. Frondorf, Mr. Miller, and Ms. Marinucci. Anyone else? Okay, then we will move on to again, our next case, which is a schematic review. It's HOC 24-35, 1950 West 26th Street in the Market Square Historic District. It's the Ohio City Hotel, new construction. Got Dan Whalen here. Saw Amy Haney. But yeah, this is, as you'll see, I guess, long thought of as the Market Avenue parking lot. So it'd be nice to see an actual building go back to it. So with that, if you guys want to go through your presentation, just let me know when you want me to change slides.
Sure. Thanks, Dan. Hello, everybody. Dan Whalen. I know some of you pretty well, and others, it's good to meet you for the first time. We are proposing schematic review here of our proposed hotel on parking lot at the corner of 26th Street and Lorraine Avenue, right next to Great Lakes Brewing Company. Places is my new development company that I started in the spring. I left Harbor Bay after developing the intro building, which everybody should be familiar with across the street. Led that project top to bottom, and I'm an Ohio City guy. I lived on 32nd and Clinton for a couple years, and Now I'm in Tremont, but very close and in the neighborhood every single day. And so excited to show you what we have. Amy Haney from DLR Group is on, as well as our architect representative. And so we'll be tag teaming our way through the presentation here. So you can go to the next slide, please. Just a little bit about us. And so this is more filler stuff that everybody's happy to take a glance at in their free time, but just getting the company up and rolling, and excited to roll out some future projects. So basically a mission statement there, so we can keep going. Again, just highlighting projects that we've completed in the area. Next slide. What we're going to go through here, we can keep rolling. Again, can read that later on, but I'll walk you through kind of the program here as we go to the next page. Okay, so the site is highlighted here in orange at the corner of Lorraine and West 26th. It also has an appendage there, kind of forming a T-shape off to West 28th, which is adjacent to Great Lakes Brewing main loading dock, as well as McLean Court, which is that kind of little brick road strip that slides in between those three-story buildings at the corner of 28th and Lorraine and that dock. We see this as a huge plus for the way we orient the building and the way we access back of house trash, loading, mechanical rooms, things like that are just necessary to have in a commercial project like this. And West 28th Street, functionally at this point between Lorraine and all the way north to Bridge, really is like a service drive for Dave's Grocery, for Great Lakes, and inevitably for our project as well. It's not really pedestrian friendly on this block, and so it sets up to be really the rear access to the project and to those sorts of things that are already taking place in the adjacencies. I think it's also good to point out here the context of the neighborhood and the heights of buildings. The Fries and Sheely condos, 5 stories across the street. The United Bank building, which is about 118, 120 feet. The Westside Market Clock Tower, which is 137 feet. And then just off the frame to the right would be Intro, which is 9 stories, and it's about 112 feet. So what we've been talking about and proposing, we believe fits within the context, kind of in this mid-rise sort of area between the 3 stories and the 10-story buildings. And we can go to the next slide and I'll start to walk you through that. I guess real quick, zoning. LR C3 local retail is our current zoning. There's an overlay on the Lorraine side, and at the moment, what we're really seeking for kind of the progress here is to get approved to move forward to the BZA with a variance for our use. And so while we're going to be talking about design primarily, one of the aspects that we really need to push forward with for purposes of getting our entitlements completed and our financing lined up is the zoning itself. Hotel use is not currently allowed in a local retail district, but it is one district adjacent on the city's scale that will allow us to proceed with a variance application as opposed to a full rezone. And so at the moment, we got a zoning letter back letting us know that based on our current design, that we really only have that variance request. So there's not additional ones. There was a few items that Shannon Leonard had highlighted for us, but we believe our design conforms on those. And so really it's limited to just the use variance. And I think that's an important point to note, because even if we end up changing our design or have adjustments to make, we'd really like to proceed forward to the BZA for that variance, even if it's in advance of some more detailed approvals on the architecture. So we can go to the next slide. These are existing conditions. So as everybody knows, this is such a beautiful parking lot in its current form. I'm teasing, but we have recently closed off Market Avenue to vehicular traffic permanently, and we'd like to see some more programming there over the long term to really highlight, Great Lakes Brewing and the ability to kind of expand their patio and do some things that tie in with Market Square Park to make it more vibrant. And we see what will be our hotel's front door as kind of staring immediately down the former, vehicular Market Avenue, looking across to what we hope becomes a really beautiful activated space between the West Side Market's arcade building and the larger Market Hall. And so we're playing off that in terms of making architectural decisions and laying out our building and those sorts of things. But what I want to point out here currently is the amount of power lines that are in the vicinity here are enormous. Luckily, they are all CPP, so we don't have to go through negotiations or conversations with both they and First Energy. It's limited to CPP, and to date, our game plan is to remove and bury all of these lines to further enhance that pedestrian experience, to get rid of as many of these as possible on and around the site. There will be a few that linger on the backside, but generally speaking, what you see in these two photos would go away. In the bottom right, it's a trash corral for kind of shared use among some of the local retailers that front onto Market Avenue. And so as part of our work with Ohio City Inc., who is selling us the lot, we are arranging to build out a permanent trash room that is within the building, so that this is no longer kind of an eyesore. And what we'll do is we will kind of establish really what amounts to like a license agreement or a lease for that space, and kind of rules of engagement for the neighbors, since we're providing a more distinct and enclosed trash location so that it's not visible the way it is today. Go to the next slide. Again, just a little bit more context around the perimeter of the site. McLean Court, so this is kind of looking from the site itself out towards 28th Street to St. Ignatius Wasmer Field. These power lines connect to the buildings to the south, which are fronting on Lorraine. We're working with CPP and with our electrical engineers to figure out which lines can be buried and which lines have to remain, but they bisect our site, and so it's going to be important that we get rid of some of these just to be able to make way for the project. And again, regardless, removing some of these and putting them underground will by far improve the visible and aesthetic of the surrounding area. And then just the view from the hard corner, sort of a panoramic of looking west down Lorraine and north down 26th. You see kind of the tightness of the sidewalks. There's some atypical street planters that are shown on 26th right now that are sort of framed in with 2x10s, and the pedestrian experience really isn't one at the moment. And on Lorraine, there's no buffer between street traffic and this sort of 6-foot sidewalk swath. And so the things that we're proposing in our plan deal directly with these and enhancing that experience and making it more walkable and making it feel a little safer for folks. Because the reason we want to build on this lot is to further connect the neighborhood, in addition to adding a really glaring void in terms of use. And so just wanted to point those out as we get further into the plan, and once Amy will walk you through that. So next slide, please. Here's the general program. We did have a couple conversations kind of preempting this with OCI board members, just to talk about, hey, this is where we stand on things. This is what we're thinking about. This is where we're going to do with the design review. And I think the program might adjust a little bit, and we're still weighing our options as it pertains to parking. I can imagine that parking is going to be part of the discussion here as it revolves around aesthetic and architecture and context, considering we're proposing putting it above ground. I think parking is always a lightning rod in the Ohio City neighborhood. I think a lot of it is perception as opposed to reality. And we've been working with adjacent landowners who control a fair bit of parking to determine if there's a way for us to more actively manage it and make it more complementary in nature and less exclusive, if you will, to just the tenants in specific buildings, so that it can be better utilized around the clock. Because there's just higher demand times and there's low demand times, and there's no reason to kind of keep all that parking close to the vest if we can pass some of our use onto those lots when they're underparked. And so talking to some of those guys, talking to St. Ignatius High School here, and I think based on our use being more heavy trafficked overnight, perhaps there's a way we can trim or even eliminate most of our parking structure, which again would impact the architecture, but I think in a positive way, and it would adjust the scale somewhat. So just take that into context as we're working through this, that we're still exploring that stuff. But from a schematic nature, we thought it was a good time to propose what we've got to date so that we could continue pushing through specifically for that use variance. Go to the next page, please. And this is our current massing. And Amy, I'll pass to you if you want to start talking through kind of architecture, design, and layout.
Sure. So as Dan said, we are very much still in active schematic design mode. So I just wanted to reiterate that nothing is very set in stone. We haven't picked out like exact materials yet, colors yet, and are really just trying to nail down the massing and the approach to what is more contemporary, what is more traditional, and how we are blending those two things. I mentioned the blending of contemporary and traditional because we're trying to make the architecture of the building go along with the brand that Dan is discussing and has really done a great job of pulling together a vision for the hotel. So we've done a lot of talking about how this is more like a duality approach, like it's night and day, it's gritty but refined, and it's Cleveland and Ohio City is the underdog, but it's still very confident. So how are we going to make the exterior and the architecture of the building reflect that? So just overall, we're taking this approach of there's definitely a piece of this that is contemporary with possibly these metal panels and larger windows and some curved elements, but then we also have this very traditional masonry that is set up in a very rational condition. And then again, thinking about how this interacts with the street and becomes very relatable for the pedestrian and weaves with the neighborhood well. So just overall here, as we're looking at this scaled out massing of the corner of 26 and Lorraine. First floor, that 01 is the terminus of Market Ave. That's where our arrival is into the lobby, the valet zone to drop off your things and then drop off your car and have the valet take it around to parking elsewhere in the neighborhood. Number 2 is the lobby that is very much planned to be a very active lobby, not only for hotel guests. There'd be coffee in there, places to sit and work. It's really seen as an active space and not just a lobby for the hotel, but a lobby for the neighborhood. 3, we are locating as a restaurant, but that's really more of just some sort of leasable space. Dan, maybe you can talk later about what that could potentially be, but I don't think there is a tenant in mind for that, but there is some leasable space there along Lorraine. Number 4 is the pool deck. Right now we're talking about it being on the 3rd floor. It could potentially move to the rooftop. With Dan mentioned that we're going through some design options right now. But there is a large exterior space that is intended to be open to pool guests and possibly also a club membership guests. And then 5, the main kind of 4 to 5 stories of the building is the guest rooms. So in hotel design, really, when you nail down your guest room layout and hit that key number, that's really what's driving kind of this mass of the tower and the kind of main architectural expression of the building. Go into the next slide and we'll get into plans a little bit. So this slide was included to just show some of the setbacks that this was needed for zoning, but just to give you an idea that how close we're getting to the property lines there. You can see the parking ramp going out to 28th along McLaren Court. That is kind of the service end of the building. And then the pool deck along Lorraine on the 3rd floor. And then over on the right towards Great Lakes, you can see where that kind of trash room access is occurring. Next slide. Here we're trying to just show all of the different elevations of the building. We're not just taking this building footprint and extruding it up. It's really a lot of masses that are cobbled together. So again, 98 feet is what we're at right now. We're still going through some adjustments to key count that might go down to 72-ish feet if we can make that happen. But it is still lower, I think, than most of the other mid-rise buildings in the area.
One thing
And
I'd like to
that's-
point out on this
Go ahead.
slide is the areas that are dashed in white on these roofs are at the moment dedicated to solar panels. We are planning to deliver a highly energy efficient building beyond any measurable LEED certifications, but kind of touting some different types of sustainability. You guys who've dealt with me before, especially at Intro, know sustainability is key to the things that I want to do. We built that building out of timber, which had never been done to that scale before, and that was part of the story there as well. So in lieu of that, right now we're thinking it's going to be a concrete structure, and on the roof here, these areas dedicated to solar are going to help us create some of our own energy and power the building with those to some degree.
Can go to the next page, I think, to get into the first floor plan. Let's go to the next. That is the material schedule for the landscape, and I think the rendered. Yeah, here we go. It's a little bit better. It's a roughly schematic landscaping plan. A lot of native plants and low grasses around the outside. We will have to replant trees along Market Ave, but we're putting them closer to the street edge, and then in between there you can see the drop off. Go to the next. I think there is I try to have my pages marked up. There you go. Here's some of the materials that we're thinking outside on the ground floor. Go to the next. All right, here's the ground floor plan to get you oriented a little bit. So you can see the gray there on the west side. That is most of the service, along with a full-size kitchen for the restaurant and food service of the hotel. That yellow is the leasable space along Lorraine. There's also an entrance along Lorraine that would get you right up to the kind of pool deck and amenity level of the hotel. If you had a club membership, you could go straight in that way. And then the lobby entrance for the hotel there is located at the bottom, middle of the bottom on 26th. And then to the right, we have the offices of the hotel located there. And then you can see that public or that shared trash room along the alley between Great Lakes and the hotel. Just while we're on the slide, I do want to point out that there is an overhang over the sidewalk area that will be activated patio space that is cafe seating for the restaurant along 26th. And then along Lorraine, if that leasable area does become a restaurant, there would be cafe seating out there. Again, that is to try to make the sidewalk that's really only 6 feet, but 5 feet in places along Lorraine be a little bit more generous, and actually have some pedestrian amenities to get away from the activity on Lorraine a little bit. I think there is even a bus stop that gets the buses sometimes clip that corner a little bit. So that definitely was a concern for us to pull some pedestrian activity off of that curb line.
And just to second that for a couple other reasons, we're trying to also hold that datum to those existing buildings to the west, like a little bit more contextually. And then this Lorraine and 26th intersection is one of the most dangerous for pedestrians, I think, in all of the near west side, and if not the entire city. And so allowing there to be an area for pedestrians to kind of swoop in under this colonnade away from the street, especially as the whole Lorraine Avenue cycle track and those sorts of plans get put into place, who knows when or how or what that final design will look like. It just feels like we can maintain that that setback almost at a zero lot line while providing more breathing room for pedestrians to walk. And if we do things right, then it's not just hotel guests, it's moms with strollers and folks walking their dog that had this opportunity to kind of, again, get a little bit further from the street, because in Ohio City, specifically on 25th and on Lorraine here, the sidewalks are not in great shape. They're buckling in a lot of places. The tree grates are popping out. Where there's pavers, they're coming out. They're loose. There's areas where you have to physically move over and like almost step into the road or against a building to try to let pedestrians pass in the other direction. And so the reason that our storefront is pulled back is to really help alleviate some of that, specifically at this corner. And even though 26 is not really a heavily trafficked, fast Lorraine is. And so I think that's some of the reason, in addition to allowing us to get a floor plate above for our typical hotel floors, that allows us to get the room count that we need without having to add another floor because the building is set back even farther. So those are just some of the reasons that I'm seeing this right now.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Good point. You can go to the next slide. So up on the second floor now, we're proposing parking that is accessed from a ramp that comes off of 28th. We're still going back and forth about whether that is the correct thing for this this floor, and figuring out what is the right number of parking spaces. But for right now, we are showing parking and still working out what the screening method is around there. Dan, I don't know if you want to provide any more color on that,
Yeah.
and what your recent conversations are with some of your key players.
Again, parking is always the hot topic for Ohio City as it pertains to, block clubs and things. We've presented to the block club, we've presented to the neighborhood. Nobody really seemed to care too much about parking because this is insulated kind of outside of a residential core neighborhood. The adjacent business owners, of the Barber College, Great Lakes Brewing, and some of the folks in some of the smaller buildings on Market Avenue, almost have kind of commandeered this as like their parking lot to a degree, and so they're concerned. They know that development's going to take place, whether it's this hotel or whether it's something else. And so, as a hotel itself, all of our studies, all of our partnerships, our operators, our franchise partner, who's a big global hotel company, none of them require parking. They say 95% of traffic gets here via other means, whether it's be dropped off, or we do happen to be in a transit zone that allows us to, via the city's new TDM program, actually score high enough to require zero parking. And as a developer, parking is always, the thing that beats you over the head and beats your numbers down to make projects really difficult. Across the street at Intro, you'll notice that we have, almost an acre of public green space in the center of the building, and to the south where we put a dog park. And that's because we were able to bury the parking underground. So that was a conscious choice. We had a much wider site at 2 acres. Here, we don't have that luxury. There are old caved-in basements of buildings that used to be on this site from 80, 100, 120 years ago. And we're flush against both the street and Great Lakes and some of these buildings to the west. And so to go underground does not make sense, and quite frankly, blows up all of the cost metrics. So my strong preference would be to eliminate parking, structured parking almost entirely, and figure out a way to have spaces on the rear, kind of on that T appendage, that we could utilize, and then work agreements with the folks I mentioned previously nearby to utilize their parking lots, and honestly drive some revenue to them, whether it's Ari Marin's lots across the street, whether it's St. Ignatius High School, or whether during overnight hours it's the Westside Market parking lot, and again drive some more revenue to the city in that regard. I think those are solutions, and those are things that I've already started to kick the tires on with those folks, and could implicate the design of this hopefully in a positive way. If we, then we won't have to talk about parking screening. But that's just some context for where we're standing right now.
Thanks. We'll go to the next slide. So this is we'll call it the amenity level on the 3rd floor. This is where the pool deck is located, a bar and a kind of secondary restaurant area, a co-working zone, and then this idea of a wellness center with some plunge pools, warm, cold, and then a fitness center. And then in the orange in the back there, we are planning on, I don't want to say ballroom, but meeting space where there could be kind of medium-sized parties and events occurring. They would have access to a part of that pool deck, and then also work with the food service of the hotel to provide some food for that. There's also a kind of mini patio off the back there that could just be associated with the with the meeting space. And then the patio and outdoor space does wrap around to the Lorraine side, with some of it also being covered so that it could be, so people could be out there in all weather conditions. And go to the next slide. So this is a pretty typical hotel room floor. It does pull back a little bit from all sides of the kind of lot footprint, but hugs that 26th street face, and then just hits the edge of that Lorraine 26 corner down there that is on the left. Go to the next page, another typical floor. And then the top floor does, the top floor of the room, sorry, does have a larger suite in it. And then we'll get up to this kind of rooftop deck floor, which does have some amenity space, another bar and warming kitchen at least. I know that Dan has some concepts for maybe some food service up there as well. And then an outdoor terrace there too. And then on top of that is where you saw the solar panels, or at least ability to add those solar panels there. And go to the next slide. So as we're working through what the materials are and inspiration for the hotel exteriors, we're taking a look at these traditional materials and trying to figure out the right color palette for them, but rendering that in very orderly condition, and perhaps pulling in some details of the brick buildings surrounding it. And then you can see on the ground floor here in the middle, kind of middle left, some metal panels and more contemporary elements as well. So we're looking at this kind of blend of traditional and contemporary, like I said at the beginning of the meeting. We are still talking about how we're adding maybe one color into this that goes along with the branding, but bottom right there, we're just showing blue. I don't think it's necessarily going to be blue, but just hinting at this idea that there should be some pop of color and not have it just be this kind of masonry, gray, warmer yellow, warmer brick color, and then the more contemporary darker colors in the metal. Next slide. So here's some slightly rendered massings. Bottom left there, or sorry, left side you've already seen before. The top right is the view from Market Ave, that main entrance at the vehicle drop off and lobby entrance. And then you can see the second floor there. We're starting to show some ideas for what the screening could be. Again, we're not married to anything there, and I think I'm definitely welcome feedback of how to treat that. And then you can see the metal panel to the left and then the masonry to the right. And then we're starting to show this kind of base, traditional storefront base at the lobby level there. The bottom rendering is showing the zoomed out of the view from west on Lorraine. You can see the ramp coming up there. And then how we're interweaving the panels and the masonry together, and these two forms are intersecting. And go to the next slide. A little bit more of a ground view. You can see how the tower is coming out of the base. And then again, from the bottom right is from down Lorraine. So you can really see it start to peek out over those two-story buildings along Lorraine. And then on the corner on the right, you really start to see it as it's coming close to the corner and grabbing that hard corner of Lorraine and 26. Can we go to the next? Here's some just design inspiration for the interiors and the kind of vibe that we're going for, both on the hotel deck and the interior design of the building. And I think that might be it. And the next page. Oh, here we go. Just included these so you could see the mix of materials. Dan did mention before that this is going to be a concrete building, so all high quality materials. We do want to expose some of the concrete both on the exterior and in the interior where we can. So we're still looking for opportunities and suggestions on how to do that. Next page. Yeah, just some more elevations to see us all coming together. And just flip through these, Dan. A section to show how this is working and to give you the height of the building. Dan Whalen, did you want to follow up with kind of our most recent discussions on design or open it up to comments?
Yeah, and you know, again, we're looking hard at parking and determining if that's a necessary thing for us to deliver, especially, you know, there's about 87 or 88 spaces in this lot today in a surface condition. With our structured parking, we're only getting to about 49 spaces striped. And then, you know, if you valet park, you probably squeeze another 8 to 10 cars in there. So best case, it's 60 spaces. And it's like, is that really a good use of space and money and all these sorts of things? Or can we do something that's a little bit more, you know, thoughtful in nature and collaborate with some of our adjacent partners who own parking lots and figure out a game plan there so that we're not building more parking and inevitably driving the cost of the project and therefore, you know, driving up things that we have to charge for, room rates and such. So, and of course, for this group, aesthetically, we would like to maybe figure out how that would implicate our design in a positive fashion to, you know, rethink the base a little bit and possibly, you know, maybe the entire quote unquote tower portion becomes contemporary instead of having this sort of split down the middle. So again, those are things that we're thinking about and we welcome the conversation and workshopping some of that now. I want to reiterate, none of the materials are like baked. We don't have samples. We know that generally the breakdown of masonry versus metal versus glazing, but by and large, we hadn't chosen specific colors or anything of that just yet. So we'll open it up.
Well, thank you guys for presenting. A lot of work has been done, and so I can appreciate that. One quick question that I had was, what was the next tallest building here? Is it Intro or is it the Market Tower?
Intro, well, actually, the bank building is slightly taller than Intro, the United Bank building across the street.
Yeah.
And then Intro, and then we would be below that by about 15 feet.
This is below Intro.
Yes.
Yeah.
I just was going to make a couple of comments since I have to leave shortly. I appreciate where you guys are at in the process, and so I will try to focus particularly on the massing, which I think is somewhat successful. Like I see you have kind of a black form that's intersecting with the gray on the end. And then you have kind of the what's happening on the first and second floors, and then that being split by the entry. The way it meets the ground kind of worries me. I do like that you pull, you know, the intent of pulling it back from the street, especially on Lorraine, but it makes me, it's kind of reminiscent of like there's a parking garage on Prospect and Second downtown, where it's just like the same sort of concrete columns. And I know there's materials and color and things to be added to this, but I don't know that the treatment along at the ground is quite there yet. I am interested to see the rendering down Market Street, looking at the entry, since that's so important. I think I understand like what is there physically, but I think I would buy it more with if you provided like an image down the street. Let's see. Um, Parking, moving, parking, you've already discussed parking at length, and so I'm sure that's going to be multiple conversations, so I don't really want to stick on that. And I believe you also discussed bringing in some of the details from the surrounding brick buildings, and I think maybe that's the thing that might help this building along Lorraine. Um, I don't. I think it's out of scale. I think the large concrete columns, I think the parking and the screening, they're just really out of scale for the neighborhood. Um, and so yeah, bringing in some of those like details will help. I just don't know what that looks like right now. Um, okay, it's actually on the screen. Um, Going back to the massing, like I do think you're doing some really interesting things here where for the black on I think it's the fourth and fifth floor, I see that there's like kind of an overhang thing happening, that the building kind of steps out as you go higher. I think that's kind of a unique situation that could give this project a little bit more intrigue. I do think I appreciate what you said about including a pop of color because I do think right now, again, going back to my downtown comment, that these material, like these rendering, the way it's being rendered at the moment is just really indicative of a downtown office building. Um, I, I appreciate the curves on the corners. I think that's a step towards modernity, but um, exterior wise, I'm really not buying it anything other than the massing. Um, yeah, that's all I have for now. Unfortunately, I have to take a I have to leave a little bit early, Dan. But yeah, opening it up for comments, other folks from the committee.
Those comments is a launch pad here. I think the form that you guys have is a really good launching point for um, what could be a really elegant kind of relationship between, I think you use like a binary formal relationship between the rigid mass and then this kind of softer piece that fronts Lorraine 26th. What I think is a little unsuccessful right now is that softer mass and how it hits the ground, like what Phil was saying. And to me, it's that two-story mass relationship of that parking. And it, like you've got the stoic concrete or GFRC or whatever cladding that is on the north end of the building. And then it feels like that also plays and comes down around and then wraps Lorraine. But then on top of that, you've got this softer mass that all of a sudden stops and sits on this plinth that's a lot more rigid and looks like it defers to that other piece of the mass on the north side of the building. I think to me, it would be much more successful if you took that language that's in the charcoal softer material and carried that down to grade. And I think would also improve that moment that you're seeing in this bottom right rendering, where you could really create an impactful experience both from vehicles and pedestrian experience if you were to take that and express that down to grade. And I don't think you would lose that colonnade. I just think it's a different way to materialize that composition. I think it could be, if your concrete columns on the south end of that parking are the round, or there's a different way that if you're using out a precast for that, so you could do some interesting shapes, or if you're doing some sort of scrim or a fabric screen on just the south end of the garage to soften that harsh materiality of that concrete structure. I just think a way to emphasize that binary relationship of your formal composition, I think would make the two forms a little bit more successful so that this building feels like two buildings, but very much tied together. Whereas right now it feels like they're not quite resolved in the way they touch and in the way that the left one hits the ground. I also wanted to ask just a pragmatic question of the parking ramp. It looks pretty long, and so I assume that's probably like 6-7% slope. So just a question if that could be increased to 12% to try to get that to be a speed ramp so it's not quite so prominent.
It actually is a speed ramp, and it's about maxed out. I think it's 16% for that. It is long because our first floor height is so tall, and so you have to climb 16 or 18 feet to get there. So And then there's, transitions.
Yeah, the
at each
transitions are
end of
what make it real long.
Okay. That kind of is what
And
it is.
again, to like reiterate, we're working to try to figure out a way to maybe not have that,
And not have.
because I do think it's the best outcome for everything, for the project. And so we're working through that, and obviously that would dramatically affect the strength and the bulkiness of the base, and allow us way more flexibility, just because there's also from a structural standpoint, it's an ideal column grid for the parking, and then there's a totally different ideal column grid for the tower above.
Right.
And so it's really driven us to be a little bit of a pigeonhole to what we can do with things structurally. And so and it adds cost when you have to transition from one base size to another. And so right now, I think Amy and I and our team are considering all potential options with that.
Yeah, I love those
That's good.
comments, Christopher. That was very helpful.
Yeah.
I'd like to kind
I agree.
of throw a question out, kind of in response to you and probably for the broader group. You're talking about bringing that sort of contemporary piece of the building all the way to street level, which would be different than contextually forming the base to kind of intertwine with the adjacent architecture and some of the brick ornamentalism and sort of the other things that we've got. So those are two schools of thought and two different approaches that would affect how we elaborate here or how we move forward. So I'd just be curious to see if there's
Well, I
different
think
opinions.
it's not necessarily about bringing just like call it that mass and just bringing it straight to ground. I think you still want to emphasize datums and you want to respond to the context in the way it comes to ground. At least this is my opinion. So there's a way you can still respond to that historical context and create a building that's modern, but still defers to the historical buildings. But it isn't necessarily, okay, here's brick to 33 feet, and then here's a modern building on top of it. So, that's how I personally think I would try and approach the problem here. But obviously some of that comes down to the design team and how they want to solve this. Another way to do that is just basically, is it just a material shift too? So, is the datum there or is the datum not there and it's just a material shift? So there's a couple ways to do it. There's more than a couple ways to do it.
Right.
I think to me, it's more about a consistency of language from ground to sky, where that doesn't occur here. And I only had one more comment, and it's related to, I'm calling it kind of a stoic mass on the north side of the building. And it harkens back to one of Phil's first comments, the kind of the office building aesthetic. I like what I would assume are kind of 27-foot bays expressed on 26th and kind of those marching all the way up. But I think because those are so prominent all the way up, it brings that scale of that mass way up, and you need to bring that scale back down so that this feels still like a residential building. It's not multifamily, it's hotel, but I still think that you need to do something, either every other floor or something to make the building feel a little bit smaller so that your eye doesn't catch, whatever that is, 7 stories worth of building as one mass. And I think that'll help this building kind of play better at scale. That's everything I had. So I don't want to monopolize all the time.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Dan Musson, who else here on the committee isn't recused? I just want to make sure.
So we have, Ms. Flaherty had to step away at noon, so she's no longer here. Margaret Lamb,
Okay.
Christopher Sons, Bill already, I believe already, yeah. And
Okay.
You.
Cool. I was just curious, just to make the most of the time. I want to start off with the things that I think are great, and I love that there's a bike parking room off of Lorraine. Great job. That should be required and everything. I love to see it. Thank you for adding the bicycle parking on 26th. I think it'd be great if there was bicycle parking on Lorraine, not like the racks on the street. I know Lorraine is kind of in flux right now with the cycle track, but thanks for including the rack example in the landscape plan. I hope that sticks in there. I also appreciate the curves. I'm trying to place the style of this building, and it's clearly not like your typical late 1800s, early 1900s Victorian, but it's starting to feel like just after Art Deco and maybe at the beginning phases of modern, I guess. And I think the curve accentuates that. I'm trying to think like what's a similar building, and for some reason the old Greyhound bus station comes to mind, like because I think you said maybe there's going to be some metallic element to it. So all that's cool. This is just my feedback, and I try to balance this with, I'm not an architect, I'm just a person looking at this, giving you my feelings. Is that I feel skeptical of the pedestrian experience with the concrete, with these large columns along Lorraine. I agree with, obviously, like, even if there's thing underneath them, if that really will change how it feels. So I guess I just want to share that. I think I would prefer if there's a way to bring out um the ground floor, like building walls, like closer to the sidewalk. But to see it, like, I get it. It'd be nice to, I guess, have some covered seating area, and that would shade you from the sun, which is really intense along Lorraine. Because most of those buildings along the south side of Lorraine are short. So it also wasn't clear how the trees on these renderings match up with the landscape plan. I couldn't really figure out where they were. So
Yeah, I think that these
it,
were
like,
done before the landscape plan.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I guess I'm just trying
good
to share
call.
with you
Yeah.
some, it's in my mind,
Mhm.
because I walk this all the time. I live close by, and I just don't feel like it's really going to open it up. Or I'm curious to see, maybe there's some more renderings that can help me understand. So I just want to like share that with you.
Yeah.
The other thing, and this is kind of a transportation aspect, Dan, thanks for mentioning like the danger of West 25th or West 26th in Lorraine. Like, yeah, it sucks. It sucks there. I don't know if there's a way for you to take that on-street or slightly, like the on-street parking that's carved out of the tree zone from in front of the entrance, if there's a way to move that, because I see the way that it's currently designed prevents the addition of crosswalks across West 26th from Market. And I'm really just trying to think about that experience of a person walking between your property and
Yeah.
the West Side Market and just being like, I'm not sure how to cross this.
Well,
So
something.
I don't want to create more. Yeah, I feel like it would create more issues, especially if you got valeting cars that are lost. Eh, I guess I hope that you can maybe put a pin in that,
Yeah.
all
One
in
of
the
the things
larger. Go ahead. Go
we're
ahead.
considering there is actually we have to do a lot of work in that street anyway for utilities because we're burying all these power lines um, and in fact I think we're talking about putting a vault in the street for the buildings, which would be kind of right on the end of Market Avenue in the brick paving. And what we talked about is taking that valet zone, I think it's like 120 feet long, and just doing pavers all the way across Market or all the way across 26 to tie into that Market Avenue. So it almost funnels and it changes the texture. I think it warms it up a little bit. And, whether or not it can even be shown as a crosswalk to some level, and whether it's painted or something of that nature. The good news, I think, is 26 is already, because it's so short, it's already very, like, I think people are slow to travel through there. They don't come ripping through like they do some of these other streets. Um, and there's no parking currently on the west side where our building is shown. There's no meters on that side. So in a way, kind of feel like it's going to help us buffer that and even tighten the street down a little bit more so that it actually feels kind of like one of the references, and now I'm bouncing around, that we talk about a lot is like the meatpacking district of New York or the West Loop of Chicago, where you have historic context, you have old buildings that are 2-3 story nature brick buildings. And then, in some of those neighborhoods now, you've got like world-class architecture where they're just throwing in all kinds of quirky, fun, exciting, contemporary plays on things on top of those. And you also see like, people just cross the street at random spots. They don't go to crosswalks. They're just kind of meandering, and that's what happens in densely populated areas. And so I think I don't have a solution yet, but what you're saying is something that we can probably try to influence with our design of the hardscape at the front door.
Yeah, please consider your hardscape design at that front door. I think you mentioned parents with strollers, people who use wheelchairs or walkers with wheels, they're going to need ramps. And I really want you to think about that. That'd be interesting if you could continue the brick surface of Market. And maybe this is an opportunity to test out a raised crossing area at that intersection with some good signage and like positive guidance for people driving vehicles to like slow down. So I really just want to draw attention to that and have you think about that. And so thank you. It sounds like you are. I'm excited to see, hopefully this can change a little bit in favor of people walking and rolling. The last thing, you do you with design. Obviously this is a huge new build. Obviously you're not trying to copy what's already there with these buildings. I think something that popped into my head is in a lot of your architectural imagery for inspiration slide. All of those examples have vertical alignment of the windows.
Dan, do you mind
And
popping over the page for us?
it might be, I don't remember which one it is.
Which one?
Maybe
or-
that slide was more towards materiality and
Yeah,
not
the material
windows
slide.
per
Like I think
se.
it's a few slides after this. Yeah,
It just kind of makes the
that
facade
one.
of the building look more like a piano or like a Dance Dance Revolution screen. I I would love to see a rendering of like some vertical alignment. Maybe for all of our benefit. Maybe it doesn't look any differently in the end. Maybe you have some floor plan issues that prevent that, but I think that would generate some additional coherency between your proposal and also what's there. Last comment, this is my very last one, is I'm also happy to hear that you're adding solar. Are you really killing Great Lakes' solar at the same time?
I don't think so. Theirs is more
Okay.
kind of pushed
To the
along.
west, I think.
Yeah,
Okay.
28th, and
Yeah.
where our building is positioned on site provides relief for that. And
Okay.
we're trying to not have to impact that as best we can.
It was just a comment. There's nothing you can do. It's your air rights, I guess. You do what you got to do. I just want to kind of see Dan or your other designers and architects, like, do any of those comments make sense? I'm not a professional. This also helps me be a better committee member.
For sure, yes. It's great to hear how you would experience the building, for sure. Great to hear. Makes sense. Thank you.
I don't think I can add much to what's said. I'm definitely in agreement about considerations for the ground level experience. It's almost brutalist in its interpretation, and to me is less friendly than what's happening above. I would just request that the next time we see this, could there be a few more studies to show a little bit more about how the height of this interacts with the neighboring buildings? I'm not sure I'm 100% sold on the height. And that's really all I have to add in addition to what everybody else says. Oh, and I love that you're burying the power lines. I think that is a great choice.
I think one other thing that is important to see when this comes back is if you're doing a shared parking analysis, just to see whatever the results of that are, or kind of what fruits that is born, to make sure that, if this is getting a kind of underparked per key count, just to know where that's being pulled from or who you're collaborating with in order to get those shared parking counts brought up to whatever needs to happen for this, either 1-to-1 or half-to-1 scenarios.
Yeah, it's interesting the way parking and these sorts of things are, because there's the practical nature of what's needed to serve the use. There's the planning department's new scorecard that allows you to read everything if you want. There's the neighbors who are always kind of up in arms about more parking, more parking, more parking, and so pushing those three things together, and then of course the notion is true that building parking structurally is decreative to these projects in terms of their cost and their return on that. And so Well put. I will bring some context to that. A lot of it is just literally me walking the block and taking parking counts almost daily at different times. And you'd be amazed at how much parking there actually is available, but you just can't use it because it's permit only. And I'm trying to kind of open that up so that there's a more commonsensical approach to how we utilize these surface lots as long as they're going to be there.
But I think if we could have some sort of formalized report just to say, okay, at this time we've got this many spaces or something, because I think it is a justified approach. I've seen it done, but typically it's usually on mixed use developments that are generally retail, multifamily plus hotel or other uses. But there's 100% a basis for doing strategies like this. I just think if we could get something codified to support the strategy, I think it would lend more kind of basis to it in this case.
I had one other question too. What variances do you think you might need?
So at the moment, the only one that zoning administrator told us we needed and have a letter for it is the use. Because the two other pieces, I think we're misinterpreting the plans. It was, that we need at least 60% glazing along our primary frontages. We have well beyond that. We're almost at 100. And I can't remember what the other one was, Amy, off the top of my head, but that one we were conforming to as well. So
yeah, I think there were 3 comments. 2 were related to setbacks that I think we just needed to clarify that we were complying with the zoning requirements of those.
PRO type things.
The other one was use. Use is the only one I think that really applies.
Okay. Yeah, I guess just one other comment is, like, I know that the city is constantly tracking parking utilization at the West Side Market, and it's never full. And especially for a hotel use, like if you could somehow work a way to collaborate with essentially the nonprofit that's running the market, like if you can find a win-win, that will also help the tenants and help them keep their rents low and help the building get fixed. So yeah, and like you said, you don't even need parking. You can just TDM and just put 0 parking. It sounds like you don't need any variance at all. So I think I hope that you can be creative. I have also felt like a weird person and counted cars along these streets, and even on Lorraine, it's never fully parked. So yeah, good luck. I just wanted to add that for some context.
So I had one last comment, and I promise I'll be quiet. The canopy, I guess it's not a canopy, it's more of a pergola on top of the charcoal soft form. It very much feels like an appendage added to the top of the building, like a tiara. And I think there's a much better way to do that. And I don't even know if it's just too much of it, or because it feels like it's proud of the parapet of that building form, or I just think there's a way to study that that's going to feel much more appropriate. And if it needs to go away, I think that would also be fine, but I don't know what the penthouse level looks like behind that. I just think that warrants quite a bit more study, because I think probably at dead on elevation or even perspective walking down Market Street, like the rendering that Philip was asking for, I think it's going to take away from the rest of the building at a pedestrian level, looking up at that. No. That's all I had. Dan Musson, does one of us need to ask if they have what they need at this point?
Yeah, I guess anyone could ask. Yeah, Chris, do you want to act as chair for now?
I guess, do you, Dan Whalen or Amy, do you guys feel like you have enough at this point to keep moving forward?
Yeah, I do. I think, again, we may be back for a secondary kind of schematic review at some point if we make some drastic changes, obviously. And I'm obviously if parking moves or goes away or changes, that'll be a big one. But my gut is also telling me that like the form on the top 5 floors there and the kind of the charcoal color right now almost maybe wants to be the entire form of the tower portion, and we deal with the base in a different way. And maybe we play with a couple options, because I never really was in love with the striping of the way the brick's going all the way to the roof and forming this kind of rigid grid. But that's why we're here. That's why we're getting feedback from you guys to really feel things out. And you know, I'll say this, like one thing I try to do in all of my projects is just deliver a better level of quality than the next project over. And so, you know, at some level, architecture is subjective to a high degree. But that said, I don't want anybody to ever debate that like I'm not developing something that is high quality and will stand the test of time. And so our goal is to make the building timeless, is to make it interesting, it's to make it have some character. And all the comments today are driven to kind of that same sort of approach. And I'm excited to kind of come back around. But we do anticipate, hopefully after next week at Landmarks, being able to go to BZA with the use variance at minimum, and then come back for further design discussions maybe after the first of the year.
Sounds like a good plan. Yeah, and we do have you scheduled for Landmarks for our meeting on the 12th, so next week. So yeah, with nothing else on our agenda, we don't have any other agenda items. I did just want to note, it's kind of an administrative report. Got news yesterday. Former committee member, I think maybe he was one of the, like on the first iteration of the Ohio City Design Review Committee. Tim Barrett passed away rather suddenly yesterday. I know a lot of you worked with him, but just wanted to pass that along. So,
Thanks for sharing that, Dan. That's a huge loss.
yeah, it really
Sucks.
is. Yeah, so I talk a lot more about that, but yeah. So yeah, with that, if anyone wants to close the meeting, either Nia as stepping back in his chair, or Chris, you can still leave it up to either of you.
I can do it. We're gonna today's December 5th meeting for the Historical House Design Review Advisory Committee meeting is adjourned.
All right, thank you all.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.